Hello? Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me on the live stream? Okay. All right, well, good morning. For those of you who don't know me, we're going to get started here in a little bit. I'll just reintroduce myself briefly. I'm sure you've seen me around, but you might not have the name attached to the face. I'm Todd Shaber, one of the more recent council members. But if we could have everybody start moving back, we'll get started with today's meeting. We have a lot of things to update you on. Mostly good things, and a lot of them are already completed or works in progress. So let's get started. We advance to the next slide, the agenda. All right, so here's the agenda we're going to talk about today. We'll start with our opening prayer, and I thought maybe we'd just start with a quick Our Father. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. Okay. All right, so there's a lot going on with building revitalization updates, and I will turn this over to Tony to elaborate on what's going on and what is to be going on.
Can you advance a couple of slides? There we go, perfect. Good morning, I'm Tony Thompson. I'm the secretary on the council, and I've been asked to bring you up to date on the building revitalization. You hopefully recall that at our October annual meeting last year, building revitalization was identified as a priority for 2024. And so we've got a lot done, and we've got things in the works, and there's still things that need to be decided. I want to remind you that building revitalization supports our vision of building lasting community that follows Jesus. There are 4 components to building revitalization. One was the repurposing and revitalization of our existing structures room by room, and that, thanks to the efforts of Mark Fink and a lot of volunteers, has been accomplished. Except there are a few pieces that still need some attention, and I can think of one room in particular that I'd love to get my hands on. You are welcome to. The second piece was the stained glass windows. You may have noticed that these 2 windows have a little bit of a buckle to them, and so we're going to have those replaced. They're not replaced, repaired. They'll be taken out on the 6th of May, I believe, and so it's going to be pretty bright in here with just a bright window, and it'll be a summer-long project, so I just don't want anybody to be surprised when they come in and the windows are gone. The third piece was upgrades to the lower level, particularly with regard to moisture. And the fourth component was sanctuary refresh. So you recall we had a committee formed a couple of years ago by now to study that. There is a lot of work that's already been completed in... Can you advance the slide? Oh, sorry. I should be paying attention to the slides. Oh, just no back. Nope, one more back. There. No, back one more. Nope, that's the one. Yeah, okay, here we go. So, what's been done? We've made improvements to the live streaming layout. And I don't know if you have noticed it, but I was totally oblivious to it for weeks. But look how beautiful it is instead of all the folding tables and the wires, and it looks like it's always been there.
Looks like Judge Judy.
Made that it looks like it
fits in with the rest of the sanctuary, which was the plan. We worked with a furniture maker down in Penyan. We brought him some pictures, we showed him what was already here, and he designed the pieces for us to kind of fit with that. And I mean, he did a beautiful, beautiful job.
Yeah, it's really impressive. The next thing that's been accomplished is we did get some cleanup around the perimeter, storage, wires, some spaces that needed a little bit of tidying up. And also in the existing perimeter, we've played with a little bit of flexibility. As you can see over under the Good Shepherd window, those chairs have been in place for several months now. And I recall when my husband's funeral was staged, they were perfect for his band of brothers in the American Legion to be able to sit as a unit. So that's sort of an inkling of what flexibility can look like. Okay, remaining to do. The flooring, the carpet. This is what started the whole process in the first place. The carpeting needs to be done. And we have talked about the possibility of flexible seating. The dollar amounts that were given to you back in August of 2023 were, as estimates, were maybe cost of 30 chairs over on this side would be around $9,000. Some 30 chairs over by the choir area would be about $9,000. Middle section was anticipated about 132 seats, which was estimated at the time at $42,000 plus flooring. And we still need to do a little bit of improving the sound system to better accommodate the live stream. Okay, now we can move to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, back in October when we had our annual meeting, we voted on and approved a budget of funds to come from our capital reserve fund for the stained glass windows and the moisture abatement in the basement. The moisture abatement was estimated to be around $10,000, and the stained glass windows were anticipated to be $30,000. And the plan was that we would make the expenditure from our reserve funds, but then we would have like a little campaign fund to replace those funds. And additional congregational approval is always going to be necessary for any further sanctuary refresh. Next. So, all told, and I have to tell you in advance how generous this congregation is. We've completed the lower level moisture abatement, and it came in at only $7,000, not $10,000. We still have the stained glass windows to do. The sanctuary refresh flooring, and that's still to be determined what it will look like, is estimated to be around $20,000. And the seating is anywhere between $9,000 and $60,000. So we've received unsolicited donations before we even launched a capital campaign drive of $31,000. So we're well on our way to meeting our objectives.
From just 3 individuals.
Yes, from just 3 individuals. So once again, I want to emphasize congregational approval is required and will be sought for any further expenditures as far as the sanctuary refresh. Okay, so next. We're there. Okay, we're there. I'm not paying attention. Okay, what's next? Okay. Julie Owen and I, as members of council, will be liaisons with the Sanctuary Refresh team to try to move the process forward a little bit. We kind of stalled out because there was a lot of focus on the revitalization that went on in the entire building. The members of the team had gone to other churches and taken a look at their flexible seating, and I believe back in August, you may recall that Bob Stoltz gave you some slides of pictures of what it could look like, but that doesn't tell us what this would look like. So we want to consult with an architect to come in, assess our floor plan, kind of go through what we think we want to do, and come up with a schematic so we can actually picture what it's going to look like. And once the concrete plans are identified, a congregational meeting will be called to approve any further activities. Excuse me, get a little tongue-tied here. So I just, before I open it up to questions, I just want to comment. I know that there have been concerns. We've heard them. We're listening to you. They're recorded in all of our meeting minutes. We understand what they are, and we work diligently to try to overcome them. And one last little thought I want to give you is, because this is an investment in our community and our vision, we need to think how to color outside of the lines. So, anybody have any questions that you want to raise at this point? Yeah, Russ.
Tony, last fall we attended a meeting led by Bob Stoltz on the flexible seating during the sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of pushback. He said that that group would be coming out with a proposal regarding the seating in the sanctuary. I haven't seen that proposal.
That's right. There hasn't been one developed yet. As I said, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It appears on the slides as if there's been a decision made on how many chairs are going to
No, that was just an estimate. That wasn't a plan at all. That was just an estimate. If we did this, if we did that, if we did. Huh? Oh, I'm sorry.
Or we can just repeat the question too.
Yeah, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
Russ's question was this, that back in the fall, when we had, in August we had a dialogue, and then in October we had the annual meeting, and there was a lot of comment and concern about what our plans were. Russ was under the impression that there had already been a plan put in place. As I mentioned, the team hasn't met for a few weeks. Things were kind of put on the back burner as far as the sanctuary refresh in order to accomplish all of the revitalization that's been going on throughout the building. So what you saw on the slide, Russ, was just a guess. If we did only this, if we did only that, if we did only this, if we did the whole thing, it was just to try to ballpark there's no real concrete plan in place yet.
I can just respond also and say that, I have my mic on, that the numbers that you just saw about costs were the same numbers that Bob presented at that meeting in August. And so at that meeting, the team had also pulled together, here's what we think the ballparks are. And so the numbers you see today are the exact same numbers that the Sanctuary Refresh team shared. There is no plan that's been made. And just so that you're clear, the Sanctuary Refresh team, Bob and Margie, they've been working with Raylyn and Jim Jeffers and David Chafee. They're going to continue to serve, so all of their wisdom will continue, but Tony and Julie are going to be moving on behalf of council, bringing an actual plan to fruition so that it can be presented to the congregation and shared with the congregation.
Yeah, we don't have anything to.
Yeah.
And this is why, as I said, we want to engage an architect to have a better picture of what this structure will look like. It's one thing to look at a different church and their configuration, or look at suggested pictures from a furniture manufacturer, but we need a schematic of what how it would appear here before we make a decision at all. Did I answer your question? Sure. Okay. Sue?
I guess I still don't understand what we're trying to achieve by doing chairs versus pews. I think that there are some things that need change, but I don't know what we're trying to accomplish by doing all chairs, if that's what we decide on.
Okay, good. That's a fair enough question.
Does it bring in more people?
I'm going to let Pastor Abby tell you what the vision has been, and it's not to replace the whole intent is not to take every pew out. I mean, we could do a hybrid, or we could take it all. It's still all in the plan. But let me have her explain to you what the vision is. Okay? Thank you.
I think the vision starts with a question. So you'll remember it all started with flooring. The floor, for many years now, the carpeting has made these bubbles, and we're almost to bubble season. But have no fear, Bob Stoltz is ready with his staple gun, which is how we are solving bubble season right now. So if you walk down the aisle right now, you'll see glitters. It's staples. We have probably at this point thousands of staples actually holding the carpet down. So the question is, we need to replace the carpet. Everyone agrees that we have a flooring consideration here. We have a couple other things about the sanctuary that it seems like if we're going to have to replace all the flooring in here, we should make sure we know how we are using the space. You can see that in the last, especially since the pandemic, we've used the space really differently. That whole corner now is a live stream area. We have monitors. That's partly to connect when we've done things like Zoom, but also to allow for slides and allow us to have meetings like this easily in here. So we have some more technology than we've ever had before. We have a even more robust bell choir presence. Because we removed those pews, they are able to be out a bit and actually have that number of people play the bells. We're also aware there's a couple of things that we want to make sure we have the best configuration possible. The choir, and this is feedback I've heard from choir members as well as Dr. Jeffers, it's in a weird configuration to conduct because many of the choir members are kind of in two long straight lines, which is not kind of the optimal configuration. So all of these sorts of things say, if we have to replace the flooring, let's make sure we're working with the right footprint rather than coming in and simply replacing what we have. The last piece that has been a concern for a while that a number of people have raised is our chancel is not accessible to anybody who needs any assistance with mobility. We have no handrails. We don't have a way for a walker or a wheelchair to access the chancel. If we're replacing the flooring, can we check and make sure that there's not some other tweaks to the footprint of our sanctuary that would help to solve some of these problems? One of the things then is asking whether this is the right configuration for seating. And I think there is nothing that says by asking the questions that we're going to come up with the conclusion that we have to get rid of the seating as it is and we're going to erase everything and do all chairs. What I remember hearing Bob talk specifically about in the fall was maybe it means just shortening a couple pews and bringing in a few more of these chairs that when we need to have more seating, we can fill out the rest of the pew with them. We are very open to saying there might be some hybrid possibilities that make a lot of sense. Maybe it makes sense to not think about carpet, but to think about wood and different, so that the edges are less cumbersome, less defined of how the spaces operate. Like we have open questions. So going through the process is not predicating an answer. It's saying there are things about our current space that we are working around the best we can right now. Rather than working around them and kind of doing something makeshift, since we have to invest thousands, tens of thousands of dollars in flooring, let's make sure we've asked the question to see if there's any other tweaks or shifts we can make so the space is as usable as possible. As Tony already alluded to, having movable chairs over there instead of pews has already, by many estimates, provided things we couldn't have done before. The honor guard at Jerry's funeral was able to sit together and be at an angle that they could participate more fully. When we have music, we have been able to use this space flexibly. When we've needed more chairs, we've taken all of that down and been able to add more chairs. We are playing with it to see what might be possible, but there's been no answers. And so the first step for this team to really focus on this question, there's probably a reason why we've managed to do all the rest of the building revitalization and we've left this for last, because it's the trickiest. None of us have exactly what the answer is like in our head and we're just waiting for it to come to fruition. We really want to get this right. And so the suggestion that the first thing the team will do is work with an architect to ask exactly these questions. Maybe the architect will come back with, you've got just right, you really don't want to get rid of any of the pews because they're really serving your needs the best, but you might make this tweak or that one around the edges. Maybe there'll be a couple other suggestions we haven't even thought of yet, but let's do that process first. The results of that will come back to the congregation. You all will have input on those ideas at that point. And as Tony has said a few times, no money will be spent on any of this beyond securing the architect's services without congregational approval, because we can't. Any other questions? Marcy?
I just want to thank council and the two pastors. I feel very included in your decision making, that it's a big change. It's a big change, but I feel like you've done your very best to keep us on the steps and the whole process. And that just, to me, it guarantees a better outcome at the end, that we're all talking out loud to each other about the situation. So I just want to thank you.
Anyone else? Ruth?
I was just going to add that, where's the microphone?
I've been here a while. And so when I think about the revitalization, I think about, what happened over here in the choir loft. And you kind of wonder why we are kind of in this weird little shape there. Remember, we used to have an upright piano that we would wheel in on a Sunday morning. We would roll it down the hall, down the ramp, and in here, and it would fit in that corner there. And that's why there's that weird corner of the choir loft, because the piano used to go there. And the organ used to face. So many things have changed, and this has become quite awkward, because now you see we have this beautiful grand piano and space for a piano here that we don't need, but there's no way to put 2 rows of chairs there for people, but the piano's there, and you've got I watch people come back from communion, and I'm just so afraid someone's going to trip or fall or bump into something, and I feel like I'm almost in the way sitting there. So that's part of revitalization, just making it flow. And I can't wait to see what happens here, because we are kind of spread out in a strange way, because the big open space here used to be a piano, and now we have that, which is gorgeous.
Thank you for that. I had actually no idea why this was in that funny shape. Oh my goodness. It makes sense. I remember the rolling the piano, but it never connected that's why we had this particular step.
It's very difficult for the choir to hear each other the way it is here.
Yeah, the configuration of how you sing is hard to hear each other because you're in a straight line, there's no kind of corner, right. But again, we can't change anything unless we at least shortened a couple pews. And if we shorten a couple pews, then do we really want carpet and wood along this line? So then it's flooring, and then that's why it's this big question that, oh my goodness, we really need to ask all the questions at the same time. And that's why we're using staples in the meantime. Yeah, back to the staples, which I'm grateful. Staples at least are keeping us safe right now from the bubbles. Russ? The architect study, the exact number?
I think the estimate we got was about just around $5,000.
$5,000. It was right around $5,000. And that was to include the time working with the committee as well as actually presenting architectural layout. 3 of them, I believe. 3 of them, so that there would be 3 ideas that would come out of that for consideration. Yep. Any other questions? I'm going to let Amy speak to that. Oh, you have a microphone.
So, as part of the work, we had an initial conversation with, a very preliminary conversation with an architect in Rochester from a firm that has done sanctuary refurbishments in very recently. And so we had an initial conversation with them and asked them to just put together an estimate for us. And so that's where that came from. We've seen examples of their work, and we've had an initial conversation. The Sanctuary Refresh team, led with Tony and Julie from council, will need to, decide if that's the place to go with, if that's the direction. But we had an initial conversation based on a firm that had experience of working with sanctuaries, of working with how worship space happens, and how do you create space that is worshipful, but also preserves, the beauty of a sanctuary. The particular person that I had conversations, is an architect, but she's also just a practicing Christian. She worships in a congregation, so she has a real, and is local, yes, in Rochester, and so she has a real appreciation for the particular challenges and opportunities that, recreating worship spaces involves. So.
You want function, you want beauty, and you want to honor the worship space.
Yes, if you didn't hear Judy, you want function, you want beauty, because it's intended to praise God, and so you want the space, whatever you come up with, still functions in that way. What was the third thing you said? Function, beauty, and
way that honors
yeah,
worship.
yeah, and a worship space that honors God. So those are the things that we're really trying to approve, which is also why there are a lot of options that the Sanctuary Refresh team could present to the congregation that would be very functional options. But one of the things that the Sanctuary Refresh team itself has said is, we don't want just functional options, we want beautiful options that enhance this particular worship space. And so that is an important part of the component of what they're working on.
And that would then be available to outside groups.
Yes, Judy said, that the space then would also be available to outside groups. I think this is one of the other things that it's just worth noting. When the work of the Sanctuary Refresh team began, a lot of the other building revitalization that we have since accomplished was kind of a dream in our mind. What if we could do this and this with the other space? What if we could, figure out ways for our space in the facility as a whole to be more available and accessible to the surrounding community? Well, since the work of the Sanctuary Refresh team started, a lot of that work has been moved forward and is completed and is already in the process. There's a lot more organizations that are using that space. And so when we started this conversation, we started it kind of theoretically, well, there might be community groups that would want to use this space. Well, the reality is that as more and more people use our facility for various needs, more and more people are using this space. And so while it is still primarily a worship space for Bethlehem and for this community of faith, more other organizations, music groups, music recitals, all kinds of things that are in line with our vision and our purpose as a congregation, but also are using this space. And so thinking about the flexibility of our space is not just theoretical any longer, it's much more a part of how we are doing our ministry. And you all will be involved in making those decisions, because they'll all come to you.
I want to encourage you, if you have questions, concerns, issues that you want to talk over, don't rely just on today. Call me, call Julie, call anybody on the council. Please, we want people engaged and involved and we want your feedback and your input. Have I covered everything? Okay, I'm going to pass this back to Todd then.
Thank you, everyone. Speaking of our beloved choir, as you all are aware, Dr. Jim is going to be resigning from his position as our choir director. There's going to be a couple of opportunities to recognize him and his 18 years of service. That predates my time here at Bethlehem, so it's tremendous. He's going to be recognized in worship on the 19th of May. There's going to be a reception, as you can see on the slide over my shoulder. There's going to be the podcast interview with our pastors dropping next week. The council has approved a small token of appreciation for Jim, which I hope he'll appreciate very much. And that will be basically the gist of recognizing his service. I'll turn it over to Pastor Amy to address the next steps, which would be filling that vacancy.
Okay, let me just say also, can you put the slide back, just one? In addition, we invite you to share any words of thanks or appreciation in cards or notes. We will gather those for Jim, and we will present them to him on the 19th. So if you have expressions of appreciation or words of thanks for the ministry Jim has done over the last 16 years as part of the community at Bethlehem, we encourage you to share those with us, and we'll share them with him. For filling the vacancy left by Jim's retirement, we are in the process of reviewing and making revisions to the position description that Jim has been working from. We hope to finalize that in the coming weeks, and then we will begin to move forward with the search process. We want to have, after the initial conversation that we had with Jim when he shared the news of his retirement, we are going to be having another follow-up conversation just to talk to him a little bit about his impressions on the position description and if any changes should be made to that. And also just talked about kind of what makes sense as the next steps from his perspective, so that we can have his wisdom as the existing chancel choir director as we make a plan for how we're going to move forward. But we are very much aware of the of just the ways that the chancel choir enhances our ministry and our worship in really wonderful ways. And so our plan is to move forward so that we have a chancel choir director in place in this fall, and so that the chancel choir can resume that wonderful ministry that they do on our behalf. So, in process, moving it forward. Any questions about that?
I think it's, I'm glad to hear that this process is in place, because my impression is the sung word here is as important as the spoken word.
Can you just say that again, Judy? What you just said?
Okay.
The last part.
The last part. That I believe that the sung word here, the musical word, is as important as the spoken word here.
Yeah.
And to keep that in mind in the interview process.
Yeah. What Judy said, I think, speaks beautifully. This congregation values music, values the sung word as another way that the Word of God comes to us. I mean, I experienced that again this morning in worship, both through the choir anthem and the hymn of the day. That preaches to me personally as much as anything else that happens in the life of the congregation. And so in order to honor that, we want to make sure we've got the right position description in place so that we can continue to uphold what is, really clearly a value of this congregation. Thank you.
We get the next slide, please. As Pastor Amy mentioned this morning in the announcements, there's going to be a couple of opportunities to open up discussions on spiritual and estate plans. Obviously, that's sometimes a tricky conversation to have with your loved ones. I know in my own situation, this is kind of a nice icebreaker for my mother and father-in-law. So on the 5th, after worship, there will be an opportunity to start that conversation. It's going to be the topic of physical care and spiritual planning, followed by an opportunity on the 19th, which would be financial and philanthropic planning. That will be, as you can see, in person, in Zoom, and recorded for playback. And again, it's meant to be a starting point for a conversation with your adult children, so feel free to invite them. Even if they're out of the area, I think the remote access might be a super helpful way to start that conversation if you haven't already done that with those who care about you. Yes?
So it'll be recorded for later if we want to get our families together?
Yes, the question was, will it be recorded for later if you want to get your families together? And the answer is yes.
Yes. Yeah, it will be recorded, and so you can be together here, you can be hybrid, you could watch it at a later point. But both Pastor Hoffman and I have had the experience of attending and caring for families at the time of death. And as you can imagine, the grief of that experience is its own just reality. And for many families, knowing that they are carrying out the desires and the wishes of their loved one at the time of their death is a great comfort to them. And it can be a challenge when those wishes and desires are not known and a family is in the throes of their own grief and having to make those decisions for themselves. And so that is why we are starting this conversation and why we invite you to start this conversation if you've not already had it. The opportunity to begin to talk about this, to be able to begin to share your desires and your wishes are a way that you prepare your family and help to care for your family at the time of your death when you're no longer there to give them your guidance and your insights. And so that's why we really are glad that this conversation is happening and encourage you to be a part of it. We'll be giving you some resources and things like that so that you can continue to think about this. And as always, Pastor Hoffman and I are available if you want to have individual conversation with us about any of these details. But what's really important is for you to talk about them with your families. So hopefully we'll give you some resources to begin to do that.
Yes.
Yeah, Kathy.
Thank you. So I was just wondering, this is just a kind of logistics. May 19th, is not that the same day that we're going to be honoring Jim?
Yes, it is, and that's why we're doing it at a later time. We're doing it at 11.
I just wondered. Seems a little tight to me, but that's me.
It is. I mean, the challenge was that the folks that are working on pulling this together wanted to be able to have 2 sessions before, kind of people escaped in the summer months. And we didn't want to do one on Mother's Day, which is the 12th, so if we would have done it 2 weeks in a row. And so, we have a limited number of times, and so that's how we made the decision, was to go with the 19th, but do it at a later time, so that we really could celebrate Jim's ministry. Yeah, it's a fair challenge.
We also hope it's an ongoing.
Yeah.
We also hope it's an ongoing conversation. I think there's some ideas about maybe this is something we revisit annually and we offer annually, or maybe not on that particular timeline, but in a regular enough way that we become a congregation that says this is important. How we think about the later years is just as important as, I think Amy said in the announcements earlier, is just as important about kind of how we live together with one another right now. And I can say I have actually been in the midst of a lot of these conversations with my own parents recently. It's often precipitated by legal choices, right? They're updating their will, and so that has prompted a lot of these conversations about all the other stuff that doesn't need to be dealt with in the will and doesn't need to be written in legalese. But I want to make sure me and my 2 siblings have all heard and seen the same things, so that none of that is a surprise when those times come and those decisions need to be made. And I am guessing that, I'm hoping this is not something we will deal with in the next year, so we'll revisit these conversations as time goes on, as circumstances change. So we hope as a congregation to start weaving this into regular things that we tend to do with one another. It kind of goes along with the support group offerings that we have around grief and caregiving. What would this look like to tend to it in a regular, it's not the kind of thing we need to deal with every single day, but probably on kind of an annual, hey, let's check back in. Those who haven't thought about that yet, those who are now in a different stage of their own life and they have different circumstances to take into account. Let's normalize this conversation, not as a one and done, but as something that we're thinking about. And we can do that together and learn from the wisdom of people who've recently lost a parent, and learn from the wisdom of those who've already gone through it with a spouse or another loved one, so that we are starting to think about things that we've never had to think about before, but we can do it in the context of a community walking with us.
Well, Pastor Amy, don't go anywhere. You've got the next slide, too. This one's more you than me, the survey.
This is be aware. The Mission and Social Concerns team is in the finalizing process of a survey that they will be sharing with the congregation. You might remember that a few years ago when the congregation authorized sharing our blessings grants to go out to the congregation. At that time, the team that was working on that conducted a survey to find out how does the congregation think about sharing resources beyond our walls. And so based on that, they identified some priorities that you as a congregation felt were important for sharing resources, sharing grants and gifts beyond our walls. And so the Mission and Social Concerns team is just in the process of redoing that survey, asking those same questions and a couple of other questions again, so that as they do their work, as they do their planning, they know that they are being led by the wisdom and the insights of the congregation. So they're in the process of finalizing. I think you will be able to see that survey in May probably. And so we'll be sure that you know about it and you have an opportunity to respond to that as soon as it is available.
You get the last slide, please. Okay, the financial overview. So you might recognize that I am not the typical person who presents the financial. How's that? Is that better? No? Is it upside down?
No, it's on.
No. Hello? No? Yes? No? We'll do that. We'll do it the old-fashioned way. How about that? All right, we'll do that. Okay, so church operations. I don't think I can hold this way, so I'm going to turn my back to you. Galinda says it continues to be encouraging. Now, keep in mind, Easter was a little bit earlier this year, so the numbers don't jibe as they normally would from calendar year, fiscal year to fiscal year. So as of the end of March, our receipts totaled $264,000, which was about 10% more than this time last year. But again, keep in mind, Easter was a little bit early, so we expect that to normalize next month and when the April tallies come in. Expenses of $223,000 through December, pretty much right on plan. In fact, might be a little bit better by about 1.5%, so we're making good progress there. The Synod mission support is a little bit over, but we're under in staff and property, so it's kind of evening out, and I think in total we're right where we should be. As was mentioned before, we had 3 anonymous donors, very generous donors, contribute to the stained glass projects. And an update on the house. I believe we approved this. I don't know that the work has been done to do some plumbing maintenance that had to be done. So that money, I think, has been authorized to be dispersed, but I don't believe the work has started. But that was a pretty necessary maintenance program to take care of. So that's pretty much that. Are there any questions from the financial point of view? Oh, there's one in the back. I thought I was going to get away with no questions.
Has it been discussed about the need for funds for the youth group that's going to the convention? Is it going to be publicized, the need of funds that they...
Well, I can speak to that just quickly, but Pastor Amy, if you have any other thoughts. I know they've done a couple of the fundraisers. Those sorts of activities have been going, but as far as additional funds and fundraisers, maybe you could speak to that a little better than I could.
So one of the things that this congregation has traditionally done is set aside annually funds for programming for our youth to participate in either work camps or the National Youth Gathering. And so that has gone on the last few years, even when we have not been having youth participate in those. So we have money set aside, thank you. We have money set aside that we will draw on so that the youth, they will contribute a portion of the cost, the congregation will contribute a portion of the cost, and then there's some fundraising for an additional portion of the cost for the youth that will be attending the National Youth Gathering, 5 youth, 2 adults. There have been 2 fundraisers so far, the Easter Pancake Breakfast, and then we had a fundraiser, a dinner a couple of weeks ago. Right now, I'm not exactly sure what is planned for those folks, but they're certainly welcome ongoing donations and gifts made to that to help support the youth as they go. Do you have some other thoughts?
Yeah. I think you're losing your words. Preaching just took it right out of you today, so we'll tag team this. So soon, I'm not sure exactly when, but I would imagine in the next few weeks, the bulletin board that has been covered with hearts since February is going to get recast as the Say Yes to No board, NO being New Orleans, because that is where the youth gathering is happening. Took me actually a little while to figure out why we were saying yes to no, so I thought I'd explain it in case you had that same hiccup in your brain. So that bulletin board will see, you'll get a chance to see the fundraising efforts, but there will also be information about what else they're preparing for and how else they're preparing for the gathering. The gathering is over 4 days, so there's a theme for each of those 4 days. And Pastor Amy and I have 5 days? 5 days. Pastor Amy and I have decided that roughly the 5 weeks leading up to their departure in mid-July, we will actually use those themes for our preaching and worship. So we'll have a way to kind of share in the ideas and kind of connect that way as well with what they'll be doing, and there'll be information about those themes on that board as they develop it. So kind of, we're really trying to emphasize financial support as well as prayerful support, and one of the ways to encourage our prayerful support is to kind of stay curious and know what they're doing and what they're experiencing, so we're trying to look for some of those ways to foster those connections as well, because as Pastor Amy said, the congregation has been very faithful in financial support over the many years by dedicating always some monies in the church spending plan, even in years like 3 years ago when the gathering didn't happen because it was so close to COVID, the National Youth Gathering didn't happen. So we've been doing this now for 6 years, waiting for the next one. So hopefully that helps to give some answer, but your contributions are always most welcome, and there should be information soon on the bulletin board, or any contribution made to the church that says say yes to no, or just youth gathering, or just youth. We'll make it get there. Okay.
That's it. I was going to pass this over and outsource the closing prayer.
Oh, outsourcing the closing prayer? You want me to? You could probably sing something, because I hear music is another way to proclaim. The Lord be with you. And also with you. Gracious and loving God, you reveal your presence to us in so many ways, through good humor, through song, through the gathering of your faithful people here in this space week after week, through the word of God proclaimed in so many ways, through the meal that we share around the table of Holy Communion. You also reveal yourself in the faithfulness and generosity of the people of this community, in the willing gifts of money and time and presence. For all of this, we give you thanks. We give you thanks for continuing to gather us in this space, for gifting us with the trust to carry out your mission on this little corner of Church Street and Perrin. Send us forth into the world so that your mission grows larger, that your love reaches more corners of this world, and your presence is made known to those who feel far away from it. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
That's much better than I could have done, so thank you for that.
You never know how the Spirit's going to blow, Todd. Underestimate the Spirit.
All right, well, that's it. Unless there's any other questions, we're good.